Hey folks, and welcome back to Brackenhide Hollow. Now, again, much like the other Dragonflight dungeons, so this is going to be a crash course. So without any further delay, let's get into the first pack. So, the first pack has a Brackenhide War Scourge. The War Scourge is the main concern here. It has two key abilities that you have to be wary of. One of them is Rage Storm, which is an enrage that you can dispel or soothe. Keyword being there, soothe rather than an actual dispel, but shiv and tranquilizing shot will both work. And then you also have Hideous Cackle, which is a AoE fear that you obviously need to kick, especially early on in Brackenhide Hollow, otherwise you are going to end up running into many other packs and it will lead to a wipe. You then have Mystics in this section that cast Earthbolt. This is traditionally going to take 2 people to lock down if you're looking at melee kicks. The reason for this is because the Mystics will just constantly cast. So by having 2, you can then position them in a place where, like we did there, you can stand them under everything else and just AoE them. Thankfully, they don't have a lot of health. Following on from this, you have Claw Fighters that do Vicious Claw Mangle. And that is just an ability that you can stop via stuns, fears, horrifies, and the like. Again, with fears and horrifies, if you're going to be doing this as a warlock, make sure that you're using Nightmare so that they are feared in place. You do not want any rogue packs being pulled. This particular route that we're doing, I suspect, may be a Mythic Plus route because it is a very quick way to get the 5 Tuskar that you need freed without pulling undue packs. There is going to be a percentage argument to be made, depending on which route you take following this, as to how you treat these packs, essentially, and whether or not you collect a lot more at the start, like you would with the Murlocs in the upper part of Tazavesh, for those of you that remember that dungeon, where you had like 60% of your percentage done before the first boss in terms of trash count, or you just pick it up later because, as I say, there are multiple paths after the first boss, depending on whether or not you want to deal with Tree Mouth or Gut Shot first. But all in all, this first area, if you can make sure that you deal with the War Scourges and the Mystics, the rest of it's fairly easy to deal with. The Decay Speakers just do Decay Surge. Again, you can kick these and just to get them into the pack, but otherwise you just need to be wary of it. And if you have disease spells, you are going to make Brackenhide much easier. Also, alchemists, do be wary of the fact that there are cauldrons located around this first area that can be used as a cleanse if your healer doesn't have a cleanse. So Druids, make friends with alchemists if you're not already one. It will help the group massively. Now, this first boss, or triad of bosses, you have a few mechanics to be wary of. In Heroic, this goes a little bit too quickly, but we will discuss each of the mechanics in turn. So, for the Warband, you have Savage Charge. This is where one of the 3 hyenas will charge a target. It is your tank's job to soak that charge. Otherwise, you're going to take an incredible amount of damage. You then have Decayed Senses. The healer needs to take priority over this and dispel it immediately, for it is quite a powerful impairment. Greater Healing Rapids. You need to kick that because it is a heal and is quite a powerful one. Should it go through, it will massively set you back, especially on tyrannical weeks or higher keys in general. You finally have Hex Trick Totem that you need to be wary of because it will CC you if you're caught in it, and it stays up for a long time, resulting in a wipe. Now, we have taken the left path here. Obviously, do be wary of traps, and do be wary of this wall as well, because you can be pulled out of it, or locked out of it rather, if you're slow. You can see there that it closed behind us as well. Now, the other option for this path actually takes you up to Treemouth first. We are currently aiming towards Gutshot, and that path is a little bit different. I might show a route with it when we come to the Mythic Plus videos, when I do POVs and walkthroughs. But for now, at least, the general route is to go to Gutshot first. Saves you having to double back on yourself. Now, these hunters, stalkers, and gut stabbers aren't overly impressive. The stalkers are a bit of a pain because you can't directly kick them. So you kind of need to kite them into a location, but you end up in a position where you have multiple stalkers and you just kind of need to cleave them down as best you can. The rogue-like gut stabbers, on the other hand, do shadow step targets and apply a poison to them, so do be wary of that. Now, just as we wrap this up, we're going to go into the next boss, which is Gutshot, a hunter-like boss that will summon ads, and the main fight and the main crux of this is how you deal with those ads. Unfortunately, at the moment in Dragonflight and on the lower difficulty, she has a bug where call hyenas can force her to respawn. Hopefully this is fixed for the Mythic Plus element, or they do something to make sure that the hyenas don't despawn, because if they despawn and haven't been killed, then she despawns too, as you're about to witness now. So hyenas come in, and she immediately despawns at 4.3% health. Now, obviously, with this being a heroic, that wasn't really a problem, but let's talk about her mechanics. So, she has Gutshot, which is a tank buster and a knockback. That is the main concern of your tank, obviously. You then have ensnaring traps. These are green traps that you will see placed on the floor, much like the old hunter traps of old. Avoid them, but they will play a part later in the fight. She then has call hyenas, as you saw. Unfortunately, it bugs her, so we can't demonstrate the final mechanic, which is Feeding Frenzy. She will cast this when the hyenas are up, and it will lead the hyenas to fixate on a player. That player then needs to kite the hyenas over these traps, clearing both and immobilizing the hyenas, allowing for them to be DPS'd. If you're playing a high melee group, you'll find that this mechanic generally will be very simple, because you'll just kite the boss to stand on one side of the traps and the hyenas will naturally walk into them. That does obviously increase the priority that you have to kill the ads, because when they fixate, you'll be in a world of hurt. Now, moving on from this, you've obviously gone to the War Scourge. We've discussed these. Nothing too dissimilar. You also have Stink Breath. A couple of Gut Stabbers, and just a Hunter as well. Unfortunately, there's not many ways you're going to be able to comfortably skip these packs because of how tight that particular part was that we've just run through. Unless you maybe have a Soothe or a Sap or an Imprison or something like that. But they're an easy enough pack to deal with at this point. You've got the Stalker in the back just shooting. Scented Meat's about to get thrown out, which was on me. I have a Fixate for the pet that no longer exists. So think the Inaran Plains with the Birds of Prey mechanic, essentially, for those stalkers. Now, Stink Breath does a Violent Whirlwind. He's just a named mob, but he does also have a frontal cone that disorientates the tank at times if the tank isn't careful. That can make things a little bit sloppy in terms of aggro, but all in all is relatively easy. Now, Treemouth himself is very much a tank and spank type boss, with Vine Whip being a frontal cone that the tank needs to be wary of. You then have Decay Spray, which is a frontal dodge. So as long as the tank's not facing it anyway, you're okay. You then have Infectious Spit. This is a spot heal or a dispel for healers, with ads being spawned. And then you also have a group run task, which is your Grasping Vines. If you get pulled in, much like with Noraxus in Neltharion's Lair, you will be consumed. Being consumed increases the damage you take for every subsequent consume. So just bear that in mind. When you get vined, run away. And then that brings us on to the Gauntlet stage. Now, this is very much a Gauntlet stage. There are a few points within this section that are safe. They are small little caves that those small little witherlings just came out of, and there is a further one up at the top end where you can actually run in to catch your breath if you need to. I can't remember if it drops you out of combat, so that is something, again, we will have to test. But as you can see with this tank, we're kind of doing it in two poles, which is the ideal way to do it, but it does mean you need to be on top of kicks in order to group things up. You have the witherlings, and to the right of our screen, you'll see a yellow flashing cauldron. That cauldron is what will cleanse any diseases that you have. So, alchemists, be wary of those. This spreading contagion, you can see, green circle, don't run into people. In this case, the monk was trying to skip a corner and ended up forcing me in a position where I couldn't get past them. So she cleansed me, stood still, and stayed at the back, which allowed me to get in range to deal with Death Triarch Rathai. Now, Rathai has a few mechanics. Going to be very, very irritating for any caster. I do apologize. But you have Decaying Strike, which is the tank buster and applies an absorb effect to the tank that the tank or the healer will need to heal through. You have Choking Rot Cloud, which is a silence. As you can see, it rotates around the fight space, and you need to just get out of its way, or if you're a warlock, you can Unending Resolve it if you have no choice to immune the silence aspect of it, but you will still take damage, so you do need to be wary of that. You can see a totem in the left of the screen. These Rotburst totems need to be killed. All DPS needs to swap to them. Havoc is your best friend as a Destruction Warlock when it comes to that. And then finally, Decaying Strength, which is just group damage and is a healer problem. The boss essentially buffs its damage, and enemies hit will cause it to lose a stack. So during those periods where you're running around, the stacks will increase and then will decrease as your tank is getting clobbered. So with that, that concludes this video. I hope it's helped, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.